Prison guards of Reddit, what is the strangest thing you have caught a prisoner doing in their cell? Detainee facility oversees new prisoner intake. Handed dude a bar of soap to take a shower. Instead he takes a big bite out of it, chews once and spits it out in disgust. Tried not to, but couldn't help laughing hard at the look of total betrayal on the guy's face. Homeboy thought we were hooking him up with a snack. Not my story, but my uncle said he walked inside a cell belonging to a political prisoner, one who was very adamantly against homosexuality and very publicly decreed that gays should die. Upon walking inside the cell, he saw the prisoner with one penis inside his asshole and one penis inside his mouth. They broke up the orgy. Prison rules obviously restrict sex, and interviewed everyone involved to make sure there was no sense of rape or forced sexual conduct. Turns out the politician instigated the threesome, and it had been happening for the last month. He only had a 6-month sentence, and had only been serving for 2 months by then. Wild shit. Was doing count one night, and on inmate was upside down. Back on the wall, feet in the air, sucking his own dick. Now this particular wing of the prison wasn't cells, it was more like cubicles. So I do the only proper thing, yell out, "What the fuck are you doing, inmate?" Some other inmates that were awake bolt up and look over to see this half-naked, surprisingly flexible weirdo floundering around. Good laughs were had. Well, by everyone, except one inmate of course. Not me, but my fiancé is a prison guard. On a prison transport from the hospital, an inmate took a seatbelt and put it through his intestines. Just stitched stomach. Also another time he ended up putting lizards in his stomach. Another fiancé was doing count and saw an inmate wrist deep in his ass, having the time of his life. There was an inmate that would make action figures out of his poop and fight/play with them. Whatever one lost in the fight, he'd eat it. Former correctional worker here. Not a but non-custody staff were used for custody posts a lot. Happened so much in the federal prison system, there's an official term for the assignment and everything. I got put on a shakedown crew one time. I was fairly new to the job, so some old timers thought they'd fuck with me and assigned me to shake down a particular cell without telling me who it belonged to. I tossed it like I had been taught. Tore into everything. We weren't looking for anything in particular, just a routine shakedown. We would do it every so often to keep the inmates in line and on their toes. I found an atlas. Not overly shocking, but against the rules. Inmates aren't allowed access to maps, escape attempts and everything. I wrote the inmate up on attempted escape or something like that. I can't remember the exact violation term. Long story short, the cell was inhabited by a lieutenant in the Gotti family, a guy no one ever crossed. Staff steered clear of this guy normally. He was a model inmate, never got into trouble, just was going his time, but not a guy you wanna mess with. The violation paperwork required my name and a full description of what I found. It gets read to the inmate at a hearing. Not one of my co-workers stopped me from filling it. When I got back to my office, my supervisor heard what I did and went pale. He was truly worried about my well-being. He called the prison captain and got the paperwork shredded. He explained to me this guy wasn't to be messed with. He could have easily found out where I lived and dealt with me. I still remember how close I came to truly fucking up my entire life over a damn atlas. Not a prison guard, but was on a field trip to a prison as part of a criminal justice class. We saw this one prisoner eating chocolate ice cream. When another student asked the guard why does he get to eat ice cream, the guard replied back, "That's not ice cream." My partner works at a juvenile center for boys. Apparently a teacher was teaching a class and one of the boys got sent on a timeout back to his pod. And the pods here looked like in those prison shows where it's a big room with a lot of smaller individual cells, but with one wall that goes up to the ceiling with windows that's like 30 to 40 feet high. Anyway, he got sent to his pod and 10 minutes later the teacher looks over and the boy had managed to scale the wall of windows and holding on like Spider-Man at the top. I was told lol. I used to work in a juvenile detention center. I have a lot of stories to share. Most notably, a kid was sitting on his toilet sobbing uncontrollably, taking a shit and masturbating all at the same time. A kid peed under his cell door, so I would slip in it as I walked by. I nearly fell. Another kid stuffed his sweatshirt down his toilet and flushed it until it overflowed and then covered his door with wet toilet paper so we couldn't see him. Since we had to be able to see him so that we knew he wasn't hurting himself, we had to open his cell. He began to fight us, so we had to wrestle him to the ground, and he was face down in about an inch of toilet water. Another one pooped in a sock and was swinging it around like nunchakus. My mom is a retired prison guard. Asked this question to her, and this was about what she said. A guy committed suicide by dismantling the light fixture in his cell and electrocuting himself. Another guy somehow sawed his own hand off with a serrated shiv and was hard at work on his feet when they found him. But the one that took the cake in her book was when not one, but several inmates somehow obtained a stray dog and were taking turns having sex with it. i.e. literal bestiality. Inmate not a guard, but this was a strange one. I was in the unit one day when my cellmate who didn't have a job, I had one, and was out of the unit 8 to 9 hours a day, told me about what was going on. A few guys were getting cock rocks put in. I didn't know what these were, and he explained it is where you take your flaccid penis and pull the excess skin from the top of it up in the air. Then someone cuts the skin open. Underneath the skin people put dominoes that were shaved down into shapes, usually hearts. Some guys had a whole ring around the penis bulging out. The thought behind this is that when having intercourse with our female, the clitoris will be stimulated at the same time as penetration. It sounded too gross and homophobic for me to take part in, so I passed. This required having 2 to 3 people in the cell to help the process along, which is so strange in itself. The Spanish dudes got pissed when the dominoes went missing, and we narrowly avoided a riot until the guards brought in a new set. I used to work at a prison, and we had an inmate there that would rent out his colostomy hole for other inmates to fuck. He would apparently just read a book while they were going at it. It was well known that he had AIDS too, so there's that. Inmate had a metal bar probably 1/4 inch round that he had broken off and snuck back from the rec area. I walked in on a normal round and he didn't notice me. He was running the tip of this bar around in a square pattern on the concrete floor, shaving the bar to a point. About 2 minutes later he looked up and noticed that I had been standing there the whole time watching him do this. I just held out my hand and he handed it to me. The other inmates started busting out laughing. Guy with one leg fighting another guy in his cell. Guy with one leg started it. We had a little person that was gang affiliated start a fight with his cellmate. There were several calls I was glad to miss. One of the codes we have indicates offender on offender assault, to which additional responders come to help contain and break up the fight. The same code is also used for offender relations. Remember that no kind of sex in prison is considered consensual. So if the reporting officer is not careful, you get a bunch of responders that might just show up to the relations instead of an actual fight. Not mine, but a friend that's a co, and he swears this is true. Backstory is this guy's the most dangerous inmate at Walpole, who's there for 2 life sentences. His idea for revenge is to rape people, not out of sexual intentions, but out of hate and dominance. For example, he tied a couple up, raped the woman with the man watching, then raped the man with the woman watching. Now in maximum security prison. Anyways, he constantly is found jerking off in the front of the cell, asking guards if they want some of this big black dick. Huh. And yes, it really is massive. My buddy has a sense of humor and fucks with him back. He's told he is going to rape him and his family when he gets out, and my buddy responds with, "Not if I rape you first." Just weird shit like that the guy does, and is in solitary confinement for raping and injuring other inmates. Lol. My uncle was a warden. He was giving me a tour and told me a story about how some inmate was able to get some kind of poisonous pill smuggled to him so he could commit suicide. They threw him in a separate cell for suicide watch and forced him to shit/puke it out. The inmate tried to rummage through his own shit trying to find the poison so he could attempt suicide again. Not a prison guard, but worked on a contract replacing it kit in UK prisons as my first job after leaving the army. At every site we got a full security brief and what to do if X happens. The most interesting one was a story of a prisoner who had a photographic memory and who was a trained locksmith who used his training to break and enter. From just the sight of a key, he could recreate it and did so using a pumice stone and scraps of metal from a vent fan. He made one escape attempt where he managed to get all the way to the perimeter fence, but snapped the crafted key in the lock and was captured. They had a full photo board and the keys he crafted on display in the training room. They were impressive. Another weird thing was a fight in a lunch queue as we were being escorted through a wing, because the prisoner being served took the last beef pie and the only ones left were chicken. The guy behind didn't like chicken, and I'm sure he hit him so hard with the metal tray that there was an imprint of the guy's head in it. Not a co, but my brother is. He found a guy trying to erotically asphyxiate himself by making a noose out of his bed sheets and hanging himself from the ceiling light. He had to try and restrain him while he was jacking it. That's not the worst part. While my bro and another guard were trying to get restraints on him, he started to lick up his own semen. Now I'm uncertain about a lot of things in life, but I do know for a fact that this prisoner must have been the life of many parties when he was a free man. One dude who was completely off his rocker, never seemed to sleep, and was constantly screaming and doing weird stuff. A few highlights. Flapping his fingers from side to side, doing the Zoidberg scuttle around his cell, and yelling whoop 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 whoop. Holding his arms straight sideways, leaning backwards at an almost 90-degree angle, and screaming fire every missile, blow up the sky, blow up the sky. Having an argument with himself that went something like, I'm going to fuck you in your asshole. Oh, you're gonna fuck me in my asshole? Yeah, I'm going to fuck you in your asshole. You're gonna fuck me in my asshole. A guy I met recently used to transport inmates to federal prison. He said they'd frequently piss/crap themselves assuming they'd get a pullover so they could change. Not the case. They just sat there in their own fesses for 2 hours, with everyone having to deal with the smell. Not me personally, but I know both the officer and the inmate. The officer had just conducted the end of night count. Normally an officer would not make a round for at least 30 minutes after that. This particular night the officer made another round to pass out memos to the inmates about a lockdown the next day. Upon arriving at this particular cell, the officer saw that the inmate was totally nude, laying on his back with his legs behind his head. The inmate was vigorously masturbating, aiming directly for his mouth. The officer dropped off the memo and kept walking, not saying anything to the inmate. The best part is that the inmate would clearly know that officer had come by during his fun when he saw the memo, but would have no idea which officer it was. Jail. Not prison, but we saw a group huddled together in the pod. Usually suspicious. When we investigated, we found they had broken a piece off of a domino. They had then filed a toothbrush to a sharp point and used it to make a cut on the side of a willing inmate's penis. Then inserted said domino piece into penis for a rib for her pleasure kinda deal. He went to the hospital. Others were questioned. Turns out this was a relatively common body modification. I'll never understand people. I was working a unit where the doors had chuck holds to pass dinner trays. One guy was refusing to close his, but wasn't being aggressive or throwing stuff. So the shift commander said fuck it, it's about to be night shift, wait till later in the night and close it when he falls asleep. 4 hours later I get a call from nighttime shift commander. Is my chuck closed yet? I responded negative. Inmate sleeping with foot out of the chuck.